Yeah, so I guess I have two questions for you, Gabby. One, can you explain for our viewers and listeners what we just heard from Lee Zeldin with the EPA and the $20 billion? He said they've found $20 billion in fraud. Explain more about what that is and why that's important. And then I'd love to hear also your thoughts on critical minerals, because from what I understand, I did some during the Biden administration. I interviewed the governor of Alaska. I interviewed somebody from the Utah Energy Development Organization, and also talked to people from Nevada. Joe Biden expanded, or he basically did more banning of mining of critical minerals on Nevada land without even talking to the governor of Nevada, which I think it was, just really bad taste. And to me, it seems like Biden was trying to talk out of both sides of his mouth, where he's like, I want to have more critical minerals, which are heavily mined in China. They're dominating that market right now. And yet Biden would not release the federal lands, which is where a lot of these critical minerals are. So what's your take on what we can expect with that? And do you think the United States, because as I understand it, it takes a long time to even get to the minerals, to find where they are, to get the excavate. Like we're so far behind compared to China. Do you think we'll ever catch up?
I'll answer your first point and then address the critical minerals question. But what we're kind of seeing this administration do, which has certainly received a lot of pushback from a lot of climate activists because they're just, used to not having a lot of pushback. But Administrator Zeldin has come into the agency and noticed that there's been this kind of questionable stewarding of government programs and government grants. Where is this $20 billion, the gold bars, as he claimed, coming from? What does it mean? And how is it being stewarded? What initial printing I have seen into it and what has been uncovered so far is a lot of those monies have gone to shell companies or kind of questionable green capital entities who are receiving billions of dollars. And sometimes they are, or what is being uncovered rather, is that they're tied to big financial players in the Democratic Party. And so that is why Administrator Zeldin has placed a lot of scrutiny on these programs. He wants to put the mission of the EPA back to what it's supposed to do, to protect air, water, lands, and make sure that things are responsibly stewarded, not be a slush fund for certain pet projects. And so that might, upset a lot of people who, fight on behalf of the climate or for climate advocacy. But sunlight is the best disinfectant. And if it can lead to the EPA working more effectively, stewarding taxpayer dollars well, I think it's a welcome change, and it won't detract from the agency mission statement. And I think you're seeing all across the board, Department of Energy, Department of Interior, this refocusing back on the mission and not so much putting climate posturing ahead of the intended mission statement of responsible energy development, responsible land conservation. And then to your point about critical minerals, we are certainly behind. And it didn't help that you had, as you said, Carrie, then President Biden talking both sides of the critical minerals issue. He wants to supercharge a clean energy future, but he wanted to rely on minerals that were taken from countries that have worse environmental practices than us, refused to approve most energy or most mineral projects, didn't want to approve anything in Alaska, denied a permit in Minnesota with the twin metal mines, the boundaries outside of Arizona, well beyond the national park. A lot of people said it would be in the national park boundaries. It's not. So he really fell into a double-edged sword, but it's not surprising because that's where I feel like a lot of climate activists are, where they say they really want to catalyze a clean energy future with a lot of intermittent sources. And then they also want to explore minerals. However, they don't want to do it at home where it could be done safely with more regulations, more scrutiny, and more cooperation between different stakeholders, those on the ground who would be impacted, the local federal administrators who reside in the different states. And so you're right, China does own the majority of processing and refining of rare earth elements, critical minerals. Do we really?
That's because China owns most of the rare earth minerals.
That's true. Yeah, that's where I'm going with that. But to beat them at the competitive edge, we really seeded in that with not competing in this. And I think this is a bipartisan problem. But here back in the States, you will have to look to see, how do you assess certain mineral projects? Some people support lithium projects. Some people don't support lithium projects. We have a lot of uranium here. We're somehow importing half of our uranium deposits from Russia, which is unheard of. And we should be looking, here to see if that could be done safely. So we can try to help narrow the gap there. I'm not sure we can totally have an advantage over China. That's going to take a lot of unleashing and deregulation and possibly working with other partners. I think there's discussion about Ukraine critical minerals, but we have a lot here at home that we could start to source and start to tap into. But it's just a matter of if there's an appetite to do so. So I hope that answers your question.